Welcome to Ceasefire, where civics meets civility and engagement meets empowerment. Ceasefire is hosted by former Bernie ISD trustee and owner of the Bernie Bookshop, Dale Adams, and by former Bernie City Council member and local insurance agent, Ron Ceros. Ready, aim, ceasefire.
Good morning. Welcome to Ceasefire. My name is Dale Adams.
And I'm Ron Ceros.
And today we are talking about information sources and the importance of reliable information sources, both local, national, of all sorts.
A great example of local would be this broadcast right here.
Yes, and this radio station.
Absolutely. Yeah, Barron Wiley is a reliable source.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, now that we've done that.
Shameless plug out of the way. Let's get to the show.
So we all get our information from all kinds of places, whether it's from, well, some people do newspapers and radio or websites or podcasts. But the question is, how reliable is it?
Right.
Especially in today's world of AI and deep fakes and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. You know, somewhat related, I want to start everything here. I hear a lot from people that say, well, I couldn't do what you do. I'm not in sales. And I tell people all the time that if you ever got married or you convinced somebody to go out on a date with you, or if you applied for a job and you were accepted for that position, to some degree, you sold yourself. And in order to do that, or to convince somebody to go out on a date with you or to marry you, you know, you had something about you, something about what you said had to be credible. So credibility is an important asset. You've got to respect that, right? You've got to treat that very carefully. Your reputation is on the line. And so if you say something that isn't credible, if you engage in gossip or rumors, or you share a story that has been passed on down to you, and you're not the first source or the second source, but you're the third or fourth source, you're putting your reputation at risk to a client, to a future spouse, to even your own children. You're risking your reputation in engaging in that, you know, in gossip or sharing information that isn't credible. So credibility is very, very important, and it's important to seek it out when you want to share information, especially in today's divided political environment. If you're going to engage in a discussion about abortion or anti-Semitism on campuses, or whether or not there truly is a global climate crisis, and you are sharing information that you received from your standard news source that leans in one political direction, or your credibility is at stake.
Yes.
And you become just another cog in the machine, just spouting out information that, you know, in these little echo chambers that you and I have talked about numerous times on this show.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a fascinating discussion you've got there, because usually when we think about information sources and reliability, we think about organizations and newspaper people and all this other kind of stuff. But you're talking about each of us individually, our credibility and our reputations and our value as a news source is important.
Yes.
And I think you're completely right. And actually, when you're talking about it, I was thinking, yeah, whenever I want to ask a question about health insurance or Medicare or something like that, I call you up and I say, hey, Ron, what do you know about this or that? And the personal information source is actually our most important. If we want to know something about something in Bernie, we go to somebody that's involved in that.
Right. Kat used to, Kat, my wife, for those of you that don't know, I used to complain to her at times about people coming up to me and saying, well, you know, so-and-so's running for this position in the county or in the city. Who should I vote for? And I would get agitated. It's like, oh, man, do your research. I do my research all the time on these people, right?
But that's why they go to you, because they know you do.
And that's what she would say.
Yeah.
She'd say, Ron, don't you realize that they trust you, they respect your ability to go out and get information and be nuanced and pragmatic. And I was reading something yesterday. I wish I'd written this down. Trying to remember it's talking about sources, and I don't have one. But, oh my gosh, that's funny. But this individual that was writing the story was talking about how people go community leaders or go to experts. That's just our way. It's normal. And recognizing that you could be a vital source of information to somebody. Like you just said, I have a lot of people that come to me when it comes to the subject of insurance, even if it's an insurance I'm not involved in. Just, like auto insurance, they still come to me and they want information. And I understand that. And so I'm very careful to protect that reputation. It's my livelihood. Yeah. Yeah. And we should endeavor to do that across the board with just about anything. We're not going to be an expert in everything. We need to recognize that. If you're not an expert in politics, it's probably a good idea to dig extra deep to get information and to not spout off anything at the top of your head. Well, I watch Fox News, right? Or if you're on the other side, well, I watch whatever it is now, MS Now, or I think what was MSNBC, right? It's like you need to look for multiple sources. Yeah. You actually need to go out and seek the opposing viewpoint and challenge yourself, and question your beliefs. It's really important to do that and make sure that you're knowledgeable and credible and that you have done your investigation.
I agree. And it's once we get beyond our community that the reliability of your sources becomes even more important, because at the local community, it's usually individuals. But beyond that, I don't know anybody that, well, I do know some people. But when I want to know what's going on in Washington or in St. Louis or something like that, I hear about some news, I'm going to have to go to something that's written or published somewhere.
Right.
And that's where you start getting gray, because you're depending on a reputation that may be fabricated or maybe not even exist. And yet you don't know that they have a bad reputation because you don't know enough about it. And so that's why you got to dig in so many different directions to sort of get an idea of reputations of sources. Yeah.
If you were to go back to school like I did, and I kick myself frequently for doing that, but if you go back and you have to start writing papers like I'm doing now, and you read about reliable and credible sources, because your citations have to be what the professor is going to deem to be a reliable source, right? And they're going to ask you for primary and secondary, and in some cases, tertiary sources, right? And
you're describing something that I bet a lot of people don't understand the difference of. I think a lot of us that wrote papers in college or even in high school might have learned at the time what a primary source was, but I bet people now don't really know.
That's a good point. So I'll back up then and say, let's talk about primary sources. And a primary source would be like you in front of me right now, you telling me about what it's like to operate a bookstore. You're the bookstore guy, and you're telling me, and so I go and write a paper about operating a bookstore, and my citation would be Dale Adams, owner-operator of a bookstore. That's a primary source.
Right. Now, if Barron wants to do a radio show on bookstores and he uses your paper,
I'm the secondary
You're a secondary source.
That's correct. Right. And now if Kat decides that she wants to tell a friend about owning and operating a bookstore, and she cites Barron's radio show. Now that's a tertiary source, right? So we've now moved on down the line. And you've heard this anecdote before about how you tell somebody in a room something,
the telephone,
and then it goes down the line, and by the time it gets to the last person in the room, it's now about Z, right? It's something completely different. That is the danger of getting away from primary and secondary sources, right? I'm in the open enrollment period, which is my busy time of year for my business. And I had somebody call me the other day, and they were concerned about losing their subsidy. In fact, they've been watching a lot of news. In fact, they've been watching a lot of it doesn't matter. They were watching a lot of the news, right? Source doesn't matter in this case.
Because it's meaningless.
But they were convinced, because of all of the rhetoric that you hear, that their subsidy was gone. And I said, well, where did you get this information from? Because when I looked at their income and I looked at their situation, they qualified almost for a complete subsidy. And they said, well, I heard it on the news. Right? And it's like, well, okay, if you just listen to the news, but you don't go digging for more information, if you don't see how it applies to you personally, then you're going to get a lot of fear. You're going to get a lot of bad information or incomplete information. In this case, it was just incomplete information, right? And so that's why it's important to go out and not just take something that you hear in the news or read in the paper. And right now, we've got listeners that are hearing my voice and they're saying, oh, yeah, you can't trust the New York Times, or you cannot trust the Wall Street Journal, or you cannot trust Fox News, right? And it's like, well, I would tell you that you probably can't trust a good number of them nowadays, right?
Yeah.
But going back to the citations and the, what I was going to talk about earlier was like scholarly journals, and they use the American Medical Association, for example.
Highly reliable.
Highly reliable. And I brought with me today in my stack of endless information here all kinds of cool things that they're not cool things, but things that the American Medical Association had, statements that they've put out over the last few years. From 2017, AMA opposes policies preventing transgender individuals from accessing basic human services in public facilities in line with one's gender identity. And I'm not going to read the rest of it, but basically they're saying, hey, look, we're advocates of transgender people using the bathroom of their choice, right? I'm not sure why the AMA is involved in that discussion, but there it is. In 2022, global climate change and human health. And this is a very long statement, but basically, hey, if we don't do something about this severe global climate change, it's going to have a negative impact on people's physical and mental health. And obviously, that's going to be a debatable topic for a lot of people on the right. Mm-hmm. Right? And here's one: opposition to requirements for gender-based treatments for athletes. This is from 2022. In short, what they were saying is that a male or a biological male wanting to participate in women's sports shouldn't have to go through chemical castration or estrogen treatments to become more woman-like, right? And so they were opposed to that. The AMA, in my opinion, put their reputation and their credibility at risk by embracing what a lot of us would say is political ideology.
Cultural.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to put myself at risk, too, if we don't take a break.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron, and we will be back in a minute. Bernie has its own bookshop. In fact, it's called the Bernie Bookshop. Hi, I'm Dale Adams, inviting you to get lost. Get lost in a good book in our relaxed and casual atmosphere. We have a wide and eclectic selection in the Bernie Bookshop. We pride ourselves on finding what you're looking for. We do author meet and greets, host writing workshops, and can connect you with a good book club. And your young ones will absolutely love our kids section at the Bernie Bookshop. And while we want you to get lost, we're easy to find, as we're in the heart of Bernie at the back of the Richter Tavern building. We are the Bernie Bookshop. Welcome back. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron, and Ron is about to jump right back into it.
Yeah. So what I was talking about before the break was that the AMA decided that it was more important to focus on some social issues and some political ideological issues rather than
health.
Health, right? And this stuff that they've put out, these statements, and by the way, if you go to their website, you will find hundreds of statements. They're cranking them out almost weekly, right? Yeah. And now they have a tarnished reputation with about half the country.
Yeah.
And I would ask them, was it worth it?
Yeah. But it's not a recent thing. I mean, a lot of people think that the medical community has lost a lot of credibility because of a lot of statements that were made in both directions during COVID. But actually, this goes back a lot farther. I mean, people have been making statements about different things and later having to change them for decades. Now, I'd like to say we're at a peak and it'll decline, but we're at sort of a very high level of that now. And there's not much trust among people who should be experts because of a lot of lack of credibility.
Right.
You know, remember when Wikipedia first came out?
Yes.
And everybody talked about, well, the teachers did anyway, you can't trust Wikipedia. You can look at it to learn the first step, but you always need to go dig up those primary sources or even secondary sources. But don't do your research just on Wikipedia. I would say that applies to almost everything now, but especially as we move into the AI world, where you can ask a question of AI, and then that's your answer, and you're done. People need to remember that that should only be the first step. And actually, if you look at your little AI things, the assistants, it'll even give some sources at the bottom of them sometimes on where you can look for where the AI determined its answer that it made up.
Right. You know, we like to use quotes on the show from time to time and tell you, oh, this is what Abraham Lincoln said once a long time ago. And today, you know, speaking of AI, it's very easy to generate a quote and put a silhouette of Lincoln's profile on there, or even his picture, and then throw his name on there and said, Abraham Lincoln said that Maytag washers were better than GE washers, right? You know, and that would obviously be false, you know.
What?
But yeah, he was an Amana guy.
Oh, right.
But there are other things, and I've seen this, where people take a quote and they assign it to somebody else, or they put words into somebody's mouth that they never said. So it's important to go and look for those citations and say, where did this person get that information? And is that a credible source? And even if it is considered, because in college and in university, as you're writing now, they don't mind you quoting the American Medical Association. They still consider that a credible source. But it's still a good idea to go and challenge that, right? I'll give you some examples of some scholarly sources. So peer-reviewed academic journals, academic books, conference papers, library databases like, I'm going to get this wrong, I think it's JSTOR. And then on professional and institutional, you'd have government websites, university websites, professional organizations like the National Association of Insurance Underwriters, reputable news outlets. I don't know if any of those exist anymore, except for the news on Bernie Radio. That's still highly reputable. And any of their podcasts.
Honestly, I think any reputable professional organization that isn't in the public eye might be more reliable. I think once somebody gets in the public eye, like the AMA, they get a lot of pressure to push in different directions, and I think that corrupts them.
That's why we do this for free.
That's right.
But, you know, if you want to pay us and sway our opinion, you know,
we're open to all kinds of stuff.
We can be persuaded.
Okay. Well, I want to talk a little bit about some specific sources.
Okay.
So you and I both read the Wall Street Journal. Mm-hmm. I like it because I feel what I really would like would be a source of news that tells me what's going on in the world without any bias. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist.
Right.
I have not been able to find it, not anywhere. The interesting thing about the Wall Street Journal is it has both biases. So its news department is actually separate from its editorial department. For years, I think, you know, why aren't they covering this on the news side? Why don't they talk about this in the editorial side? And then one year, it's like about 3 years ago, they had a blow up between the news, and the news was like correcting the editorial, and the editorial was criticizing the news side. And I was like, wow, they are separate and they have opposing biases. And I thought that was fascinating. And that is one reason why I actually find the Wall Street Journal to be more, I don't know about balanced, but it has some of both. And I thought that was fascinating because I don't think any other news source has that.
Yeah, I sometimes find the titles of some of their news stories to be a bit challenging.
Yes.
And it's funny how you'll read something about, like a recent example would be the narco-terrorism strikes that are going on right now for the Trump administration against the Venezuelan narco-terrorists out at sea. But then you get over to the opinion side of the journal.
Yeah.
And it reads very differently from what you see on the news side of it. You know.
So it's interesting.
What do they say?
Well, there's one side that's against it, and then the other side that's very supportive of it and will provide, I don't want to say evidence, but provide reasons why the Trump administration's actions are constitutional or not illegal. But it toes the line. It's the words that they use. For example, and I'll give you a local example. Anytime the Express News writes about the Buc-ee's and Bernie, it's controversial Buc-ee's, right? It's always a controversial decision. And I challenge that because it's like, well, controversial with whom? Because when I read those articles, it's always the same people that show up and complain. If you go into the comments section, it's hilarious because it's a different story. A lot of the people are like, oh my gosh, the Karens are coming out. Or, we'll take one in Floresville. Can we have one in Rio Grande City? Can we have one in Corpus Christi? Right. So how controversial is it? Did the Express News actually go out and do a survey to find out if it's truly controversial, or did they just go to a P&Z meeting where the same, and I'm not trying to be ugly here, but it's a lot of the same dozen people from Menger Springs that are speaking out against it? Well, in a community of 45,000 people in this county, or a little more, are 15 people that are upset about a bucket. And I know it's more than that. I mean, across the county, it might be half, but is it truly controversial anymore? Have we moved on to a new controversy? Right? And so it's the title, right? And it's the same with the narco-terrorism activity in the Caribbean. If you were to look at an article, and I don't know if you've got one here in this issue of the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, probably. I'll let you look at that while I talk about a book that I got.
Yeah, go for it.
There's actually two books, but they're by a guy named Ali Al-Moswawi, and I'm not sure where he's from. But this book is called Loaded Language, and the other one's called The Illustrated Guide to Bad Language. And basically, they're logic books. And it's fascinating because he talks about how to understand what's not being said, or what they're trying to bias their statement by the words they use, just like you're saying, using the word controversy when you start a discussion, just to make it sound controversial. And so it's a really neat book. We got it at the Bernie Bookshop. It's kind of neat. I like it. It's a little cartoony, but it's a neat introduction to that concept, and I think it'd be great for kids.
Yeah. Here's a great example related to a different topic. Immigration sweep begins in New Orleans. They're not rounding up immigrants.
You're right.
They're rounding up
criminals.
Illegal immigrants, right?
Yeah.
It's almost a violation of the law now to say illegal immigrant, right? You can't use that word anymore. That phrase is a no-no with some people in our country.
Yeah.
Here's another article. A key study on climate change is retracted. Now, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. It was almost the law that climate change was happening and it was catastrophic.
Science is settled.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. The science is settled. And here recently we've had Bill Gates come out and say, maybe not. And maybe it's not catastrophic. Maybe we need to change our language on this. Yeah. And the people that won't move away from that, or the people that were proposing that, now have egg on their face, and their credibility is in tatters.
Locally, we have some great news sources. The Bernie Radio, of course, is wonderful. And I love all the local stories that come out of Bernie Radio. It's really neat. It gives you a sense for the community. And there's a recent thing that's come out that I get in the mail. It's a free thing, I guess. It's called a community impact. I'm fascinated by it because it just talks about what's happening. No editorializing, no descriptions. It tells you the new businesses are coming, the ones that are closing, about the new hospital that's going to come in, and describes it a little bit. But it's actually just a small little paper that talks about what's going on here. And I think it's a franchise. I think there's like a dozen of them across Texas or something like that. But it's a neat little paper, and I like it because all it does is tells me what's going on, and then leaves the rest aside. It's pretty neat. So we've got some neat stuff here. And we got, of course, all of our local magazines and stuff that all have their own personalities and have neat articles about different businesses and things that are going on. So we actually have quite a few neat ones around town that I like.
I will say, though, that Barron is a little bit biased. He's pro-Bernie and pro-champion when it comes to football or basketball. I mean,
there's some bias there.
That guy is bleeding dark blue and purple, right? And that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. We call that community spirit.
That's right. Yeah. You keep doing what you do, Barron.
You do.
Can I ask you guys a question there, too? As fans of the Bernie Star, they alternate weeks where the Republicans get to speak and then the Democrats. And usually that's a conversation in print. They kind of say, last week this guy said that.
They used to do them on the same edition next to each other. And that was, I kind of liked that. But I think they wanted to spread out some of the arguments or something. I think that's neat.
Yeah. I think, the Community Impact magazine, what I like about that, like, for example, this issue that you have here, Building Bernie Baptist, and it's just an article about Bernie Baptist. And you'll never see anything in this paper about controversial new hospital.
Right.
Or, anything that sort of implies that there's something bad or good about it. It just says...
It's the facts, man.
It's coming.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
I do too. And I wish that we had more of this. So, and then you can decide for yourself without anybody's play on words or twisting of words what something means to the community. And I'll tell you, there are people that will tell you we don't need a hospital. And that's fine if you want to believe that. I don't. I think we do. I think we're growing. I think we're going to continue to grow. But to just get an article like that and it just says, hey, there's a hospital being built. I appreciate that.
Okay. I think that's going to wrap it up today. This is Ceasefire on Bernie Radio. And if you missed any of it, you can always go to bernieradio.com and check out our podcast. And I hope everybody's having a wonderful Christmas season, and we'll see you next week.